If you've ever read a scientific paper, or even seen people on Twitter or TikTok talking about it, you'll find that the placebo effect is becoming, in general, more difficult to understand. Some researchers and scientists believe it's an incredible testament to the power of our minds, in which we can heal ourselves from pretty much anything without actually really doing anything. On the other side, some people believe it's simply deception, forever a burden to clinical trials, and making looking for a treatment for many diseases ever more complicated. The thing is, the placebo effect isn't new. It was actually first demonstrated all the way back in 1799 by John Haygarth. But even to this day, we still have no idea how to actually beat it, as it continues to make medical research excruciatingly difficult, with it even proving what is technically statistically significant cures for diseases extreme as cancer. Let's discuss pretty much everything that the placebo effect is showing results in, and what this means for modern medicine as a whole, because there's a lot. And it puts into question, are all our treatments just a lie? Let's start with a brief history of going over what the placebo effect actually is and its complex mechanisms. Placebo is actually derived from Latin, meaning I shall please, and it was first used in medicine all the way back in the 18th century. But the concept of it actually goes even further back, and in ancient Greece, people often visited healing temples where they weren't really given anything, but it was still notable that they got better. So what's actually been happening in the brain for all these hundreds of years? Well, it all starts with expectation. When you believe a treatment will help you, it activates the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision making and belief. It essentially sets the stage for healing. Now, your brain will expect a positive outcome with this decision and will trigger the release of dopamine from the ventral tegmental area. It creates a sense of well-being, reducing pain and even enhancing the immune system. Other areas will soon get involved, such as the anterior cingulate cortex and the insular cortex, modulating your mood and pain. They'll regulate discomfort and interpret bodily sensations, ultimately turning down the volume on the body's unfavourable stimuli. It makes the person feel better because they believe that they should really be feeling better. And even the amygdala will become less active, lowering stress and further reinforcing improvement within. The brain doesn't just imagine recovery as some believe with the placebo effect. It physically adjusts the bodily processes, releasing your natural painkillers like endorphins and enhancing the immune response and mood, just because it expects the treatment to work. So we've got the theory, but what actually does it work in? Let's begin with possibly the most common illnesses we're all familiar with, the common cold or flu. There's been lots of early studies giving participants sugar pills and seeing if it helps the common cold, and in all of them it actually does, similar to the actual treatment, and this has been going on for over 20 years. And one's even more interesting, and to be honest, this is my favourite study of all time. An experiment published in the Annals of Family Medicine made people fully aware they were given a placebo or a sugar pill, and even when they were told this is a placebo, they still got better and had fewer symptoms compared to people giving nothing for cold and flus. The mere act of taking something can still trigger these mechanisms we've discussed. You can even do this at home when you're ill. This study is absolutely crazy. And if we move on a bit to the conditions that you can't see, those mentally such as depression and anxiety, it makes you wonder, does the placebo effect still work here? And surprise, surprise, of course it does. In fact, a meta-analysis published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that in mild to moderate depression, placebos can account for up to 80% of the effects seen in antidepressant treatments. The belief in treatment improves dopamine and serotonin, ultimately improving one's mood, as the antidepressant would itself. Just like before, when you expect to feel better, your brain's chemistry adjusts accordingly. In another study, the famous STAR-D study, which is the largest study on depression, only 36% of participants responded to the initial drug treatment, with a close behind 28% responding to placebo. It does however prove disadvantageous that neither option cured all, and even though the placebo effect is helping these patients that aren't getting the antidepressant benefit, it's not helping everyone. And in an even weirder study from Schaefer published only a few weeks ago, overweight and obese participants were tasked with exercising whilst either taking a pill or not. The pill was a placebo, but those that did take it lost more body weight than those who didn't take it. Obviously there are extraneous variables in this experiment, such as eating and the type of exercise, but it's still very interesting to think that a placebo can cause changes to your body as a whole like this. So, What about some more serious conditions? We can progress a little further in seeing everything the placebo effect is capable of aiding in more moderate ailments. There's been a plethora of research on chronic pain, for instance, and it too is scarily interesting. Conditions such as arthritis, fibromyalgia, or lower back pain can see relief just by giving someone a sugar pill. In fact, a meta-analysis from the Journal of Pain, following patients being treated with the placebo to significant levels, highlighted a more complex mechanism in the endorphins suppressing the pain. Once again, the body expects the pain to stop, and not only is the prefrontal cortex activated, but also the periaqueductal grey, another region involved in pain modulation. There's lots of studies that support this, including a recent one from Perfit in 2020, but as the study rightly points out, it's incredibly unethical to give someone a placebo instead of standard pain treatment, even if it might work better for them. Would you be okay being given a placebo instead of ibuprofen, for instance? But on a different note, we can see the placebo effect work in other conditions. If you take IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, for instance, it's a condition heavily influenced by stress and psychological factors, so you would really expect the placebo effect to do something, and lo and behold, of course it does. A study published in PLOS 1 saw patients with IBS given either a placebo or genuine medicine, and the placebo condition was told it was a placebo beforehand. They were told it's not actually going to do anything biologically. But even with this knowledge, the placebo group still experienced marked improvements in their symptoms to a significant level. The brain, even knowing that they took a placebo, modulated the patient's gut motility, ultimately changing the gut-brain axis. It commonly sees the release of serotonin here, which we've already discussed the placebo can do. Their IBS generally improved from a sugar pill again. And we can take this knowledge into deeper mental health research. If we take insomnia, in most cases, it's also influenced by anxiety and stress and also sleep-related habits. In a 2012 study from the Journal of Psychosomatic Research, participants were given a simple placebo and their sleep was monitored. It was found that with the placebo, the participants had significant improvement in sleep latency, which is the time they took to fall asleep, and overall sleep quality, despite the lack of an active treatment. The prefrontal cortex and hypothalamus responded to the expectation, promoting relaxation in the brain. People could therefore fall asleep much easier. So now we've got research into placebos and what they can do to moderate ailments and conditions. But is there anything more serious it can treat? We can finally expand onto the most challenging mental health conditions and life-threatening illnesses, to seeing the placebo effect show evidence in some form of treatment. Now, stay with me here because these studies, especially the latter, are honestly insane. We'll start with the mental health side of things and use schizophrenia as the example. Much akin to the general theme of this video, this also shows promise when patients were given a placebo. Now, schizophrenia is classified as one of the worst mental disorders to have, combined of negative and positive symptoms, with the latter being hallucinations and delusions, with the former being anhedonia, a loss of mood, and social deprivation. Now, it's a bit more complex than patients just being given a placebo and being cured. In fact, a review of studies in the British Journal of Psychiatry found that placebo treatments sometimes led to temporary improvements in negative symptoms such as social withdrawal and emotional flatness, largely due to the patient's belief in the treatment, that notion of expectance that we've spoken about already. Even though schizophrenia commonly affects the dopaminergic system, including the ventral tegmental area, it still has the prefrontal cortex and ventral striatum responding to this belief. But it is important to consider that whilst negative symptoms do see a reduction, your positive ones don't, such as these hallucinations and delusions. These symptoms are often characterised by too much dopamine, which is already released in the expectation process, which is why it doesn't really work for them. So we finally found something that placebo effect isn't great at treating. But perhaps the craziest thing that placebo effect has shown evidence for treating is cancer. Now, initial research was found that placebos do work in regulating pain perception in those with cancer, whilst aiding patients with nausea and fatigue. It was more so understood as the symptoms being perceived differently when taking the sugar pill and not the general effects themselves. This was found in a large study published by the Lancet Oncology, pain significantly reduced in those who took the placebo. But we can actually take this one step further, and the step itself is massive. Now, first and foremost, cancer is very rarely experimented with a placebo, and for good reason. Can you imagine giving someone a sugar pill, potentially letting cancer run rampant in the background? Of course not. But in this one study from Guy Worley in 2022 found that when given the placebo, In only around 1% of cancer patients, their tumours actually significantly shrunk. Now, this opens a massive number of questions. The tumour shrank without being given a designated treatment. This shows just how powerful the mind and the concept of expectation actually is, for the body healed itself without biological medicine. So what does this mean? Well, it kind of poses a treatment in itself. Research is always trying to understand how the placebo effect actually works on a precise level in order to make a new kind of treatment. All because it currently shows that simply believing in a treatment working can often be enough to cure a plethora of things. Being positive can literally change your life in more ways than you know. So, what do you think of the placebo effect, and what avenues do you think we should go in the future? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. And if you don't, well, that's not being positive at all. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It's free and it really helps me out. See you next time.